So you've installed your RIP. Great. Now how do I get started? Hi everybody, David Lewis here with AW Specialty Papers from the warehouse. In this series we're trying to give you the ins and outs of working with professional RIPs for white toner printers, so you'll feel confident in your ability to use your RIP and be well on your way to becoming an expert in white toner decoration. We're working with the iColor ProRIP. Functions for this are very similar to other products like the CADLink Digital Factory RIP or Print Optimizer. Now that it's installed, I want to begin by taking a slightly different approach. There's a lot of getting started videos. The RIP itself comes with a great getting started instruction sheet. Instead of repeating these instructions on ripping your first job, I want to dig a bit deeper. It's great to have some basic setups to help you get started, but if you never learn how they work, then you won't get the most from this RIP. So follow me over to the computer and let's get behind the wheel and see what we can do. Okay, here we are at the RIP, at a completely bare RIP. You'll probably never see the RIP in this state, and you normally wouldn't see the RIP in this state. But the reason that we wanted to do this is I wanted to kind of give you an idea of where the components for the RIP come into play, how they affect your workflow and how you work with the product so that you can get the most out of it. So for example, the RIP wouldn't normally let itself stay this way. If I quit the RIP at this point and I start it up, then it realizes that there's no device installed, and so it brings up the Create Cue wizard. There's no device here. It wants me to install a printer. In this particular case, I'm using the iColor 600, and I'll just let it install all of the default settings that go with that. All right. So once that's done, then the RIP now starts up with all of the user interface that you expect to see in it. So exactly how did we get to that bare RIP? Well, let's go back and look at that one more time. The first thing that we want to do is go into our Manage Cues, and we see that there are 3 cues that have been installed as a part of this default setup. So we have the Uninet, iColor 600, Overprint, Underprint, and CMYK. Depending upon what your device is, you'll always see at least one and maybe multiples, like in the case here, multiple different cues that'll be installed with those devices. As we indicated earlier, this particular RIP is distributed by a number of different companies, and each of them will configure it for their media and their printers with these defaults. And generally speaking, these defaults are a great place to get started, and that's where you will see most of the getting started videos and instructions that'll be showing you how to work with these cues. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to sort of get underneath this just a little bit, and today try and give you some background as to what goes on with these cues so that you have a better understanding of how you can configure it to meet your specific needs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and click here and hold the Shift key down and select all 3 of these and click to remove them. So that takes out all of the cues. Once I've taken out all of the cues, I'm essentially back to the bare device, but there's still the device itself that's installed. So I can go in here and uninstall the printer, and now the RIP is completely empty. So there's very few options that are available other than Manage Device, and of course the cues. If I select Manage Cues, there's none there. So there's nothing to work with. So now let's go back and see what's happening. So we can go into Manage Device and we can add a printer in. This would be the exact same steps that it would go through if I just simply restarted the RIP. So in our case here, I'm putting in the iColor 600. I'm going to let it install the default package for the 600. And then the device here is now installed and our cues are back up and running. So what does this mean? Well, it means, for one thing, if I do go in and really, do something to screw something up, I can just simply delete everything and reinstall that device, and I'll be back to pristine starting position. Now, so what does that mean? All right, we have cues, and these are the cues that represent how we're going to be processing our workflow. Each of the cues will be connected up to a particular printer. So in this case, it's the iColor 600 printer, and it's going to communicate with those printers through a port. Now, in my particular case, my printers are all connected on a TCP/IP network. Yours may be connected by USB. So whatever that connection is what you want to work with. So we go in and select the printer for each of these cues. And that's how we will enable those cues to work, all right? So now everything is connected up, my cues with those parameters connected up to the ports and the printer to communicate with them. So the next thing to be aware of is what's called print modes, all right? Now, print modes, if we go into the Devices menu and we select the Manage Print Modes option, then you'll see all of the various print modes that have been pre-installed for you from, again, your distribution partner, whoever it is that you're buying the RIP from. Typically, they'll be named with whatever the names are of the media, but print modes are considerably more important than just the media itself. So for example, let's look at how we might create a print mode of our own. So we notice across the top that there's no button to create a new print mode. All we can simply do is copy an existing one. And let's say, for example, in this case, when I'm using my 600 printer, I'm printing using the Forever Laser Dark media. Well, the closest one that's similar to that would be, for example, this two-step standard. So I could select that and click the copy function, and then it's asking me to name that. Maybe I want to name it Forever Laser Dark as my name, all right? So that'll give me this new print mode. And so now I want to make sure that I have it set up to the parameters that I want to use. So I can go in here to this option and select the Edit Print Mode button. And so my ink set, we'll leave that Uninet for the moment. The category, this is an overprint, so I do want to print, this is a transfer media, so I do want to overprint my white. The media manufacturer in this case is Forever, so I can put that in. Media description, I'm going to call this a two-step transfer, just so it reminds me of the how I intend to use this. So this is the basic criteria for my paper. Now, the next thing is this color layer. So these are where all of the print-specific parameters that I want to, to be aware of. I'm not going to go into detail as to what all of these mean today, but I am going to go over a couple of them, all right? So first of all is the color layer. I'm not going to change anything here. Processing options. This is my coverage is an underbase, which is considering that it is generating a white. The coverage that was here was 200. I'm actually going to reduce this down because I like a little bit less white than what they're putting in. I would normally even go down as low as 150%. The choke, we're going to be going over this particular option in another video because we did some really interesting tests. We printed a number of jobs using a variety of these settings to determine which one gives us the best pullback of the white from the edge. And this is really critical when you're doing rasterization because the white can create a halo around your rasterization dots, which can directly affect the quality of your color. In our testing, we actually did find that 3 gives the best results. Then the next thing down here, the use knock me blackout. This is a function that we're going to use on an as needed basis. So I'm not going to turn it on as a default parameter. And color boost is another one that we'll be talking about as well. There are circumstances where I think this is a good one to enable, but I'm going to leave it as it is for right now. In our printer options, we have things like, do we want to do really high quality printing? It's an option for us. I think for speed purposes, the 600 by 1200 gives good results. It is an Overprint ink. I am going to feed this through the multi-purpose tray. It is transparency media type, and this is a good setting for the media weight. This is what I would use in the printer to set it up for automatic processing anyway. CMYK color adjustments, these are values that seem reasonable to me. We haven't done any significant testing on this particular RIP. We have checked this in other RIPs in the past and have found these kinds of values to be relatively correct in terms that, we don't want to let the tiny dots get too tiny or the full saturation dots to overfill, and that's pretty much what this is set to do. Separation curves, none are being applied. Maximum ink level, 400%. That's 100% cyan, 100% magenta, 100% yellow, and 100% white. So it's a maximum of 400%, which is fine as well. ICC profiles, so they've provided a profile based upon their measurements of this media for a standard use purpose. You may need and want to do your own profiles at some point in time, but that's a very advanced function. For now, we'll leave this as it is. Halftones, this stays the same for the moment as well, as does the variable dot. The ink removal, this is where we want to do some adjustments as well. For example, their default setting is a 20 LPI frequency, and I can understand that because that's a low enough value that anybody can get it right. Even a very beginner can get it right. But for myself, and once you really get into production, 20 is pretty low, and that creates these fairly large size dots. Some customers don't particularly care for that. So I like to go ahead and just set this to a value that, that I'm more comfortable with, which is 27. I think that's a better choice of numbers. Angle on this is 22, but that's almost kind of meaningless. And the reason why I say that is because, unlike where you would think that the angles would be based off of a 0 point that would be like at the 12 o'clock position on your clock. This actually starts with a 0 point at the 3 o'clock position and then starts rotating from there. It's a little bit, all of these rips have some really strange ideas about things. This is one of those. My number that I like better is 67. So I'm just going to put that in. And then the dot shape, we'll go with the round dot for now. Another one though that we will set up is a line in the future, but we'll go with this for the moment. The hole size value, and this continues on with these really hard to understand numbers, 0 to 255, is basically, 255, as it says here, is 100% ink, which means no holes. So in this case, if I'm using this with 255, I'm not going to get any of the rasterization features. Then the next one is the feature in the RIP to do rasterization in partial transparency. And if I enable this, and if I have partially transparent colors in my job, then this will do rasterization or holes or lines, whatever we've set up here, in those partially transparent areas, but not, because of this setting, in the main colors. So it would give me an ability to utilize holes in some areas or lines or rasterization in some areas and not in others. Again, they default to these bigger holes, which again, I don't really care for. I think the smaller the holes, the better. So I would typically turn this value up a little bit as well. So these are more like the examples that I would want to have. So if I save that, then now I have my forever laser dark set up the way that I like it. Now the next thing that I might want to do is then make a copy of that, all right? And so let's call this the forever laser dark, and I'm going to say portrait lines. So these are going to be the setups that I'm going to use when I'm doing a portrait image and I want to use the line function with that. So I'll go in and I will edit that print mode. And again, it's already set up here with the criteria options that I'm happy with. My color layer is all the same as what we had originally set it for. Nothing is changing in any of this. There is right here, processing options. Since I now know in this setting I'm going to apply my line rasterization function to this, this is where I do want to go in and turn up my color boost, which is going to automatically boost the color, boost my vibrancy of my color, so that it will offset a bit this rasterization function. Just going to apply a little bit of that to the color, and then everything else, my print options, everything else, it all stays the same until we get to the ink removal. Now here, what I'm going to do is that I know that this is a portrait job, and 0 is here, 90 is up and down, a portrait is up and down. So I want 90 degrees as my angle, and I'm going to use line. So this is going to be a line screen rasterization. So 27, 90, and line. To make sure this is applied, we have to reduce this down so that it will apply it. Generally, I've found that 180 is a number. I mean, I apologize that there's nothing that is relevant to reality of human beings that makes this any sense. So it's just a number, but it doesn't work at 255, and you start getting rasterization when you go down, and if you go down too much, you get rid of all of the ink. So 180 seems to be a good choice. And the same for this one, which is some number between, what, 0 and 8, whatever that means. So anyway, these are values that I've found that work pretty well. And again, we're going to be going into more detail in these as we go along. So now I have two medias. I have laser dark and laser dark portrait lines. And I can create more of these. But now here's the point where I want to sort of show you something that you'll want to do just if you do create these print modes of your own, so that you don't inadvertently lose them should you decide that you want to update the RIP in the future. So I'm going to select my laser dark. I'm going to hold the shift key down, and I'm going to select the laser dark portrait lines and any others that I had created on my own. And then I'm going to come up here to where it says create a print mode package. And I'm going to press this button and select I'm just going to put this on the desktop, and I'll call these Forever Laser Dark Print Modes. And I'll just save this in a folder so that I'll have a backup of those print modes in the future. So here is my backup of my print modes, and I can close out from here. And now, for example, if I went into my queues and manage queues, and if I selected all of my queues and deleted them, and if I went into manage devices, and if I deleted my device, so I'm back to my clear RIP to start with. If I quit the RIP, and if I started it back up, then it's going to walk me through installing my printer. And I go back and select my 600 printer, let it install that package. Now I'm back here. If I go back into my print modes, then of course my Forever print modes are now missing because they've been deleted. So I can select the option to import print modes, and I can go to the print modes that I had exported and open those and select to add these two back into the list, and now here they are. So now I have those available to me. So now what I could do at this point is I could either start using this. So if I wanted to use the 600 overprint option and I wanted to use the Forever Laser Dark portrait lines, then that would set that up for that particular job that's coming in. Or I could manage my queues and go into the Manage Queues option here and select it from this list, which would make it, a permanent default for that particular queue. So this completes what we're going over today. In the future, we'll go into these in a little bit more as we go through, but just wanted you to see how you can do things with the RIP to create, custom settings for yourself, things that match what you're trying to do for your customers, and make it work for you and not feel nervous that you're actually going to break something. So thanks for your time. We printed a design using those settings. Let me just show you kind of so you can see what that looks like. There's our nice fine rasterization. So so you can see it. All right, see that? Cool. Let's see what it looks like on a shirt. Here's our shirt. You can see the rasterization, really nice detail in this. Now you've got some homework to do. I showed you how to set up these lines for a portrait mode design like this is. You go create a print mode that has landscape design settings, all right? Print mode, landscape lines, so that when you view it in portrait mode on the garment, that you've got the lines running the correct direction. Remember, I gave you a hint when we were doing it. See you when you get it done. Bye.